Thank you all for coming. My name is Marcia Polas, and I'm a Pilates teacher in Denver, Colorado. And I believe it was just after POT for this year was announced, I saw that these three gentlemen were all going to be here teaching. And I realized, as part of their lineage, that this would be the first time that they were all teaching at the same workshop at the same time. And my first thought was, I have to be here, no matter what else is going on. My second thought was, wouldn't it be incredible to be able to sit quietly at a table as they all sat and talked to each other and eavesdrop? And then I thought, wouldn't it be incredible to film that? And so then I called Nora. And she said, what if we did it in front of an audience and filmed it? So,
and the price went up.
And so here we are. So without further ado, we're going to begin a conversation with Troy McCarty, Alan Herdman, and Julian Littleford. So for a number of months now, I've been referring to them as the boys. So I'll say, boys, thank you for joining us and being willing to do this. And we're just going to start out. I'd love for each of you to just go ahead and give us kind of your background, where you each grew up, what your first career was, if Pilates was not your first career, and when you started to dance. You all danced at some point, where you studied, and which companies you performed with when you stopped dancing. So get us through the first part of your lives to Pilates.
You up first, mate?
As the most senior one. I was a farmer's son in the north of England, and I was born in 1941. And in the 50s, farmers' sons in the north of England were not interested in dance. It was a no-no. So I did what my parents wanted me to do. I became an engineer with ICI. I did an apprenticeship for 5 years, and my birthday was on the Thursday, and my apprenticeship ended on the Friday. And I was out of there. And I spent 2 years just fiddling around. I worked with my father on the farm, I did forestry, I cut trees down, and I sold furniture in a store. And then I was a member of a local drama group in the village where we had the farm. And one of the guys in the drama group was an ex-guardsman, and he retrained as a teacher. And he said, why didn't you become a teacher? So this is what I did, and I went to college and I did Laban, because in the 60s, Laban was taught as a dance drama in schools. So in our second year, we did a field trip to London, because Martha Graham was performing. And I went to 2 Graham performances, went to the school, and I thought, this is for me. So my first job of teaching was in London, and I joined the Graham School in London and studied with them for 5 years. It was interesting, I wanted to be a dancer for many years, but when I'd done 3 years with Graham, I suddenly realized that I was much more interested in the technical side of it than the performance side. I think the truth was that professionally I was a back row dancer, but mentally I was a front row one. So it just didn't go. So I was thinking, I need to slightly change my direction, and I thought I'd go into drama, so I would put dance and drama together and maybe lecture in a college. And at this point, the head of the London School of Contemporary Dance said, would you like to go to America? I said, yes. What for? And they said, well, there's this exercise technique we think would be good for the school. What's it called? I don't know. And so they said, oh, wait a minute, it's something like Pilates. So they offered me almost a year in New York to train in Pilates, and no one had a clue what it was about. 3 of our dancers had done, Bill Luther, Noemi Lapsison, Bob Cohan, had all practiced Pilates in New York with this guy, Robert Fitzgerald. So I said, well, why choose me? They said, well, 3 things. You are slightly older than regular student. It seems to be the story of my life. I had grain experience and lab experience, and I was also a trained teacher. So I went to New York without knowing what was going on and started studying with Bob Fitzgerald. And that's where it all started. This was in 1969. Yeah. So I came back to London in 1970 and opened the first studio.
And Julian?
And that's where I met you. Mine isn't as long as yours, so I don't have quite so many years. I've known Alan for a long time, and my respect and love just keeps pouring out years and years. I do thank you for everything. But I was born in North London in a little town called Hertford, and like Alan, where I grew up, dancing really wasn't the type of thing that you should be doing where I grew up. So, but I was into drama, and I was a huge David Bowie fan at that time, and as a lot of people were, I suppose. And I was very into mime and contemporary dance. And my drama teacher at the time said, you know, why don't you audition for a dancing school? I'm like, dancing school? What do I do that for? So I auditioned for Ballet Rambert and London School of Contemporary Dance. And it was very apparent that Ballet Rambert was strictly ballet at that time, and I hadn't done any ballet. So I thought, well, I'll try with contemporary, it looked easier. And I was misinformed. But, so I did 3 years at London School of Contemporary Dance, and at that time Alan had just come back and opened up the studio, and I had a hip problem, and to be able to go to, or to be accepted in the school, I had to see Alan about my congenital hip problem. So I went to see him, fell in love with it immediately, and started to work for Alan in the afternoons and do my classes at London, at the school in the morning. And I remember when you were opening up Houston, the Houston Ballet Studio, Houston Ballet.
When I opened the first London, away from the place, when I opened the studio, you came and painted the place.
Yeah. You know? Yes, we did.
It had to be redone.
So I started to work for Alan in the afternoons, and then Alan was asked to open up a studio at Houston Ballet, and he asked myself if I wanted to go, and also Michael King. And Michael wanted to go, and I was interested in pursuing the dance career. So I left and went to dance with Toronto Dance Theatre, and
was that Christopher House?
Yeah, but with the original Chris's.
Yeah.
And then I left there and joined Martha Graham in New York, and was a principal dancer with them for 8 years. And I worked in New York with Robert for a lot of time, Robert Fitzgerald. I ran Deborah Lesson's studio when she was pregnant with Noah. I wanted to go back to the history of it. So, and being in New York, you were very lucky to be able to still go back to the originals of Pilates. And then I left and started my own studio, and I live in San Diego now. And that's...
Can I just interject there? I think this was a very sad thing about New York. When I went in 1969, because no one spoke to anyone else.
Oh, it's horrible.
Everyone was a little island. So I worked with Bob Fitzgerald, but I didn't know, or I wasn't informed, that just down the road, Clara had the studio. Up the road, we had Corolla, and the next block up was in Bendel's was Kathy Grant, and they just did not. I had to find Corolla on my own, which having the community we have now is just amazing, because everyone is interlinked and talking. But then it was not.
Oh, it's horrible.
No.
No, Corolla's wonderful.
Troy, take us through your background in
Sure.
stars.
I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia originally. I started dancing at a young age, And I got a scholarship when I was 16 to the School of American Ballet. That was my big debut. So I get to the School of American Ballet and I'm taking my first pas de deux class. And I'm lifting this girl and they tell you not to look up at the girl, but I was so impressed that I could lift this girl up. And I lift her up and I was like, oh my God, and I fell back. Right? So I wrenched my back. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to send me back to Canada. I'm a failure. So they go, we have this guy that does something with springs. So we're going to send you down there and let you work with him. I got to work with Bruce King. So that was another person that nobody told anything about. And Bruce worked right down the hall from the original studio, so which was nice. So Bruce rehabbed me, and I did a national tour of Women of the Year with Raquel Welch. I did Phantom. I went to college for dance, and now I teach ballet and I teach Pilates. And that was in 1975 that I started Pilates.
So why don't you were 17 in 77. So really, again, this was when we all started to talk about this. The thing that surprised me the most, especially thinking that I knew all of your background, especially the two of you on either end, they started taking Pilates and actually teaching in some fashion 17, 18 years old, correct? No wonder they're so good at it.
It was very different in those days, I think, because the way that you learned was an apprenticeship. And I remember when I started to work for you, I wasn't allowed to touch a client. All I had to do was follow him around, and that was the way you learned. You take your hands, you put them on, and that's the way that it was taught in those days. Very different to the way that it is taught now. And I think there's pluses and minuses for both. But that's I think, how you learned, and you got your eyes and your hands working together. I always remember you saying you're teaching tools with your fingers and your eyes.
Yeah.
This gets you coffee. But this and eyes, you're serious.
But I think this apprenticeship thing was that with Bob Fitzgerald, I lived in the studio. The studio was an apartment on 56th Street on the first floor. And there was a small room in the back, but that's where I lived for 9 months. And that in the morning, I would go through the studio to the bathroom, stamping my feet to get rid of the cockroaches. So they'd move out of the way. But we spent the day, and it was sometimes 12 hours a day, just watching and learning. And you just got what you observed, really.
Yeah.
And we were not allowed to go near a client until it was thought to be right.
Yeah.
I have Bob Fitzgerald, reformer.
You can keep it.
I'm sure you did
I
not.
have Alan's body.
So, you began actually working for Alan in the afternoons. I want to get back to that. But, so you really did that apprenticeship. You definitely did that apprenticeship. But you kind of started teaching in a little bit of a different fashion.
Yeah, I was asked to teach ballet at a very early age, and they were grooming me to be a rehearsal master, ballet master. And then with Bruce really taught me to really sharpen my eye, to really, really look at the human body and to be able to digest what was going on. So I was starting to teach mat work, with what Bruce was showing me. So I was also starting to introduce, mat work with the ballet companies that I was with.
And you were saying, when we were having our little pre-talk, you were saying that on the road with a lot of these shows, they would bring a reformer, and you just sort of organically began teaching company
I had
classes.
gotten into Phantom of the Opera, and they had so much money that they were able to bring a reformer with them. So I was teaching dancers, which was really good for the dancers and very good for me to have those bodies to work with. and beautiful bodies that can do anything you want them to do.
As dancers, because at some point you all either thought you wanted to be a dancer or were dancers, it seems to me that the natural evolution after you left your dance career would either be to be a ballet teacher or a dance teacher or to choreograph. Do you think that that is the natural evolution and you all just found something that caught your attention a little bit more? What do you think the difference is between what you chose to do and maybe what most dancers would do as one career ended?
I wasn't interested in choreography at all, and I fell into Pilates, and it was something, I took the plane to New York the first time that I'd been to America, and I mean, I remember being taken from the airport into New York thinking, my God, this place is so big. and it was quite a big culture shock for me, but I just loved it straight away. And it just suddenly thought, when you suddenly get to a place and go, this is where I'm meant to be. And it hasn't stopped, which is nice. But choreography, I thought, oh no, it's not interested in that.
But I think you can also choreograph. I mean, I'm guilty of that like crazy, of choreographing on the machines.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But I don't think that it's necessarily a good thing for all dancers to go into teaching, because dancers are not always very good with their verbal skills. They're great at saying, watch me. Well, that's great, except, that reminds me about that guy that used to come to the studio that was blind. You remember? Oh, I've got to tell this story. We had this guy, and I thought he was a real flash kid, because he came in with these dark sunglasses on. It was always.
And tell them how old you were, though. About 18, 17, 18.
And he used to come in, and everybody kind of knew Homer, right? They knew where the machines were, and I never changed the machines. They were set the way that they were set, and they never changed until you moved. And this guy used to come in, he'd be chucking down with rain, and he'd come, hi, how you doing? And he'd walk down, and he'd go in and change. And he'd come and out and say, go down onto Reformer number 2 or whatever.
He was called Jack.
Was that his name?
And he was a performer.
Yeah.
He was a stage performer.
Yeah. And Alan said, you can take Jack through, and it was, oh, my chance. Wow, I can take you to the footwork. So, and he's got these glasses on, and I'd never met anybody that was, he just, and it didn't matter. So he lays down, and I said, right, I want you to, no, not like that. I said, look here, I want you to work here. And he rolls his glasses back like this, and of course his eyes float back in his head. And he said, I'd like to be able to look at that. Oh, I felt it.
So I said to him, I said, one of the main things about this technique, as Julian said earlier, is to use your eyes. Didn't you see the white stick?
I learned a lot from you.
But I should say, this guy, he was an amazing performer on stage. I mean, it was very sort of alternative theatre, but he was riveting on stage. So not good on the reform.
I follow direction like that, bad direction, my eyes away.
So you had a career as an engineer, and then a teacher, and then Pilates. You danced, and then Pilates. You danced.
Well, I taught Pilates while I was.
Well, you were dancing, right? Pretty much from the time that you were in school on.
Yeah.
Troy, is there anything else that you tried between your dance career?
Oh yeah, I got really injured as a dancer, and I went to culinary school. And so I went to Cordon Bleu, and I was going to become a chef. And so I went through the training, and I'm still teaching on the side and everything. And I get done with the training, and I go into a restaurant, and it was, I think I lasted about 3 weeks. And I went running back to the dance, career, going, please take me back. Did not want to do that. I was dealing with absolutely maniacs with very sharp knives. And it kind of flipped me out a little bit. So, as I was standing at the line with my beautiful posture, with my scapular down, it's like, they're all going crazy. And it was a French restaurant too, so it was like real snooty. So, yeah.
That was good. I'm going to start with you. Do you remember the first time that you met either of these two gentlemen?
Julian, I trailed you in Canada a couple times. You were with Christopher, I was good friends with Christopher. You had danced with Anna Wyman, or she did not like you, no? Or Judith? No, she barely liked me. Sorry, she went bankrupt. But no, I had heard about Julian. So I knew Julian's work from being a dancer with Martha Graham and, being in Canada, he was there. And then Julian, later on, when I'd opened up my studios, we brought Julian in to train my employees, and that's where I got, familiar with Alan too.
And we met in
Miami, and then I came,
Postdoc.
right. Then I came down to London, right.
Julian, do you remember the first time that you met Alan and Troy? Troy's already kind of given us the...
Yeah, I remember we have a mutual friend. That's how Troy and I met. And I get this phone call from this guy, and I want to bring you in. I'm like, okay, I think you're a friend that our mutual friend. Okay, yeah, I'm happy to come. I'll stay at Tom's because I didn't know you, and I didn't know what he had, but I was going to go out and train his teachers or work with his teachers. And guys, great experience. We just hit it off. You really did hit it off from the get-go. And then with Alan, of course, I remember the first time I went into that studio, seeing those machines, and I'm like, what on earth is this? And at that time, I'm like, we used to wear tights, didn't we wear tights?
This is tights.
God, it was freezing down there. And knitted tights, and we used to flit around in there. And,
You guys wear tights when you talk about it?
yeah.
Well, they were sort of knitted all over a bit. Sales offer.
With the velvet.
Oh my God. That should all be wearing the ring.
Only on Friday.
And what do you remember about Alan from the very first time you met him?
I thought he was bloody good at what he did. Immediately I knew, it's like when you meet somebody that you hit it off with is one thing, but when you can meet somebody and hit it off and know that you'll learn forever, I think every day that you go into the studio that you learn something new, or you should do. I always think that the day that you stop learning is the day you'll finish as a teacher. And I've seen Alan go through and keep learning, and I hope to follow in those steps just like that. And I always remember, used to wear those silver bangles around your wrist. I think Bill gave them to you, didn't he, Bill?
Yeah.
They did those silver bangles that you...
They were West Indian slave bracelets.
Yeah.
End of story. In fact, I packed up my house to have it refurbished, and I found them. And I looked at them and put them. No, it's Cartier now. I put them back in the box.
Yes.
They were noisy.
They were. That's how you knew if you were walking around. You could hear him. There was nothing getting away from that.
Well, when I taught mat work classes with the students in the school, at London School of Contemporary Dance. And one day, for some reason, I wasn't wearing this lot here. And at the end of class, a deputation came up to me and said, "Alan, can we ask you something?" I said, "Of course you can," thinking something about the technique. He said, "Could you wear your bracelets when you teach?" I said, "Well, what's that got to do with it?" They said, "Well, we know where you are."
So, Alan, what about the two of them? Do you remember the first time that you met them?
Well, I remember, Troy, in Miami with Polestar, and then we talked about me going up to up into Cleveland
Right.
working with teachers.
Right.
And I came from New Orleans, didn't I? when
Yes,
I was
you
there?
did.
Yeah. That was interesting, that was great.
Yeah.
But Julian, well,
No, I was gentle with you.
17-year-old North London boy
Oh,
with an attitude. All I'm going to say.
That was gentle. That was
was.
gentle.
But we got on, which is
we
great.
hit it off immediately. We hit it off immediately.
When he began teaching for you, did you have any idea that he would be as good at this as he
Oh,
is?
yeah.
You knew right away?
Absolutely.
You could see it.
Absolutely, yeah. But I knew that he had to, when he started teaching for me, I knew that was a fill-in. Because, you recognize if you've got a teacher that it's not, although they're very good and you think you'd like to keep them and nurture them, you know you have to let them go because that's not really time for them. It wasn't his time to be a Pilates teacher. He had to go and dance. And there's nothing worse than a Pilates teacher who's a frustrated dancer. I've had them. They're dangerous. They're really dangerous. And so I knew that he had to go off and do what he had to do with dance, which was great. Which would mean that, coming to American dancing and meeting Carol and getting married and living here, there was no longer that he'd work with me, but we've remained very close ever since.
Which is something which I pride myself on, because I think as a teacher, when you have a studio and people go through your studio, teachers go through your studio, sometimes you don't always part with the best of, you know what I'm saying. And I'm very glad that we've remained friends for this long time.
And also, I think one has to, if you've got a teacher who wants to move out and start up on their own, the first teacher that I had that did that, I was really pissed off. It was, very early in my career, and I'd worked hard to get the studio up, and then suddenly this guy went off and did his own thing to his clients. And then that upset me at the time. And then I thought, hang on a minute, that means there's another studio in London, which means that there's competition, it means it's going to be more interesting. Because when I started off, I was the only studio which was, I had no one to talk to or, discuss things. So when people move off and open their own studio, I loved it because it was competition. And I think for us, healthy competition is fantastic.
Absolutely.
But we have to be
Absolutely.
friends as well.
Yes.
It shouldn't be a negative competition. It should be a giving one,
Yeah.
which is
I agree.
very important.
Which is different now than it was, which we talked about
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
Because there was no communication
No.
whatsoever between people. No.
So you led me very well into my next question. I want you to all three answer at once and talk over top of each other, okay? I want you to, off the top, you're invited to. I want you to, off the top of your head, start naming some of the teachers that you've taken Pilates from.
Corolla,
Kathy.
Kath. No, I've worked with Kath in workshops, but not the main people. I worked mainly with Corolla and Bob Fitzgerald.
Mhm.
But the other teachers that I've had a great respect for, that I've done workshops with, Karen
Yeah.
is the lady sitting, Madeline, and it's what I find is to go to workshops and go to these fantastic teachers, and even now, after 42 years of teaching, I find it invigorating to go to workshops.
Yeah.
The people who I admire and learn from.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be, they can be teachers who have got a few years experience. They don't have to be people who are very well established. Look at your trainees, because in fact, with my training course, it's amazing what I learn from them. Because they'll come up with something and go, do you Oh, that's a very good idea.
Yeah.
It's very important. No, I steal it. I steal it. But what I do steal it, but I do say when I use it, this move came from. So, oh God, you've got to steal.
Oh.
You know, the first time somebody left my studio to open up, I was hurt like you. But then I thought the same way. Well, this is spreading the word of Pilates more, so it's got to benefit me. You know, and I just reminded that person that I taught them everything they knew, but not everything I know. I got that last word.
Troy, tell the story of meeting Ron Fletcher.
Oh my God. I was a dancer and I was pretty full of myself. I had hair back then, very long hair. And I find out that Ron Fletcher is doing a workshop. I'm there. So I get a flight, I go out, and I show up at the workshop, and I walk in the studio, and I've got fuchsia sweatpants on. This black, very blousy shirt. I've got a bandana. I got this really cool dance bag. I walk into that room, I'm late. All right, so I'm late. And I walk in, and I look around, and everybody's in black and white. And Ron is over there, and he proceeds to have a demonic hissy fit. And he starts yelling at me, and I was like, I didn't get this memo. So I was, as Laura said, I was Ron bait the whole time.
Julian, again, we talked earlier to kind of see what we would talk about, what questions were great questions, what weren't. Julian was talking about taking Pilates every place you go. And I think there's a story that he should share about.
I try to, wherever I go, even if I'm on vacation, I try and find out some sort of studio. So I take a session with it. I don't care who it is. So I just call up and make an appointment. And I remember that article that came out in Vogue magazine about rehab studios. And the naked girl laying all over that.
Yeah.
Got to go there. So this time in New York, I go in there, and they hooked me up with this young girl. And
Is that the right phrase?
They hooked me up with this young teacher, fresh out that, newly minted teacher, you see. So come on over here and we start, you see. And she's cutting me a new one. I mean, I'm sweating like a bloody pig. But I'm doing it because I'm twice her age and I'm going to bloody show up. And she looked at me, she said, and she danced with Herdman, and they were opposite. That's where I know you from. I'm like, what? She said, my grandmother used to take me to see you to dance. She said, you're not doing too bad for an old guy. Well, I couldn't walk for a week. Well, I got through.
So, having taken Pilates from all of you and had the privilege of being able to be in conversation with all of you, the thing that you have, to me, most in common is your absolute passion for teaching Pilates. Was there a time, can you remember, when you went from interested to truly passionate about Pilates and teaching?
I've always been passionate about it, mainly because I love people. And I think one of the, as a teacher, as a Pilates teacher, you need to like people. And I just find every new person that comes into the studio interests me. That could be, and like today, teaching 6 hours, that group really, I didn't realize it was going so long. I had to be told to stop, I think, because they just fire your enthusiasm. And I think this is what keeps me going. And I talk to teachers who they say, how do you manage it? I feel burnt out. I said, how long have you been teaching? And they said, 5 years. I said, either you're doing something wrong or you need to change your career. Because if you're burnt out teaching this amazing technique after 5 years, there's something wrong. There's something missing in your makeup. Now, I'm still passionate about it. I mean, you have days you want to kill. I mean, or slap. But, you know, I think we all go through that, but you get over it.
Well, we were talking earlier, Troy and I, we were saying about, are you still going into the studio, you're still working as many hours as you do. I mean, when people go to start a Pilates studio, I think they think, oh, it's great. I'll see 18 clients, make this amount of money, and it'll always come in, and I'm going to have this big flash studio. And then you start to see that money clock just keeps on ticking if you've got a studio. Even the doors are closed, so you've got to look at the bottom line, obviously, and having a business as a studio owner, you've got that, and then you've also got your teacher side. And as Alan says, if you don't like people and you don't like putting a lot of hours in, it's not going to work for you. And the clients can feel it. They can feel if it's just money to you. You've got to, I mean, when a lady or somebody turns around and touches their toes for the first time, that's like euphoric. I mean, it's like, God, you work so hard, good for you. Or they walk in and go, you know what, I don't have any pain. I feel really good. Or the first time I wake up and not take Advil. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing. It really is.
I'm on my 25th year of teaching, and each day when I go in, I picture myself having a blank canvas, and I'm going to paint the most beautiful picture that I can with my clients. So that's what keeps me going. And I have a wonderful partner that motivates me too. What?
But I think what is interesting is that I have teachers who will worry about the clients. I say that as teachers we must have this screen in front of us. That because the way we work with people, you get a lot of stuff aimed at you, and we have to protect ourselves.
As soon as those legs go up in the air, calm down.
One of the protection things, I will leave the studio and I cut off completely of what I've done on that day. And I may see I may teach in the studio, then I'll go to the theatre maybe, and I'll see a client from that day. I'll know everything about her or him. I have no clue what the name is. I have no clue. But so I have brought this shield down to protect myself. But on the way into the studio, if I'm sitting on the bus or driving in, that's when I reconnect with it. But I do not take it home. And I think that is very, very important.
You've got to shut it off.
So I think Troy is going to start this one. What's the funniest thing a client has ever said to you?
I said, this is a good exercise for this. And I said, this exercise will help you with this. She goes, do you have an exercise that will help me get on my marriage? That's one of those where she doesn't give me too much information.
Alan.
I was in the studio and one of my teachers picked up the phone, and there was this client who had been in the studio about 25 years ago, and she had left the country with her husband on his back, and she wanted to restart. And she said, is Alan still around? And this teacher said, well, actually, yes, he'll be able to teach you when you come in tomorrow. She said, my God, I thought he was dead. So when she came in the next day, I stood over her. I said, you are going to regret that. Apart from being dead, I'm ready to give you a hard time.
Julian?
I've had some interesting comments, but I remember when I must do my first studio, and this woman came to see me, and hand on hip, and she stood there pencil thin with, an immense amount of makeup on. Anyway, we became kind of close later on when I found out she was a hooker.
Oh.
And she turned out, and we didn't trade. God, she said, $75 now, you better be good. I was through with it. I was like, look, this is what I charge. If we're going to go back and forth, I'm not going to bargain with you. It's $75. If you want to come fine, if you don't, $75. She said, huh. She opened up a bag like this, wads of $100 bills and like this, and she put, I'm $450 an hour. She said, I can afford you.
I thought you were going to mention my book. I have this wonderful client who's been coming to me for about 25 years, and she was a high-class madam in London, and she looked like a suburban housewife, very well dressed. She loved opera. She's very artistic, and she came in one day. And she used to pay in cash, and she told me what she did, which was no problem with me. That was fine. And and I knew some of her clients. And she paid for a group of classes. I got this wad of cash with the bank band around it. And it had the name of the estate, which was a very high-powered aristocratic estate. It was printed on it. So I looked at it and I said, Margaret, am I living on immoral earnings? And she said, yes, darling, you are the paper man. She still comes in. She doesn't work anymore.
So were some of her clients your clients?
Yeah.
So did they have
no, we
bags
kept them
or?
apart. I knew the list.
Yes, that can be embarrassing when you have I don't know, I'm sure you guys run into it too, if there's some messy divorces and both husband and wife at the same time and you're scheduling, that can be a nightmare. Trying to push them out, but the other one's coming in the door.
I must share this story with you. I had this studio in Dallas, and all the top Dallas ladies used to come in. And we were working one day, and there's this lady, I can't remember her name, it's on the Reformer. And in the studio, you came into the main door, and that door was the men's, and that door was the women's changing room. And this, she was on the Reformer, and this client came in for her first class and moved into the ladies' changing room. This woman on the Reformer leapt up and ran into the men's. And she stayed there. So the new client came out, and she got started, and then this other one waved at me and said, beckoned me over, she said, stand in front of her while I go out. So I had to stand, and she crept around the back wall and left. And that was it. And then the next day she came, I said, what was that all about? She said, I just married her husband. And the divorce was messy. But I mean, it was so funny.
So this summer, I had actually several people approach me, Pilates teachers who teach part-time and had real jobs the rest of the time, to ask me about teaching full-time. They wanted to know my thoughts, and I think they several of them called in 1 week, and I was having a particularly difficult week, and I said, look, if the thought of never teaching Pilates again, if I told you you could never teach Pilates again, if it would make you throw up, then you should teach full-time. But if the thought of never teaching again doesn't make you want to throw up, then you shouldn't make it your full-time job. Can any of you imagine not teaching?
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all. No.
No. I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah, what would you do?
Well, I would do. I know what I do. I mean, I've got lots of hobbies and things, but I would not stop teaching.
No,
Yeah.
Not at
even
all.
if it was just a little part-time.
Not even part-time.
No, I mean,
No.
I just, it's, yeah. Why? What you, I mean,
Exactly.
I don't think I could be with myself that long. That's why I don't teach those 6-hour seminars, because I can't be with myself for 6 hours. Other teachers.
Teaching for me is just part of, well, I hate the terrible phrase, but it's just part of life for me.
yeah. It is. That's the best time to get out and go to the studio and be with those people. You know, that's great. I love that.
Tell me your favorite saying to your clients or your catchphrase. What would your clients say you say the most often?
Stop talking. Stop talking and focus.
He used to say that a lot to me.
Obviously, that didn't work.
I don't think I have a phrase, but I have a story. And I say to people, you know, the last thing you want, you know, because my studio is very close to the beach, I'm very lucky. And I say, the last thing you want is when you're walking down the beach and you feel that tugging on the bottom of your arse and you realise that's your flip-flops in your arse. So if you want nice and firm, you better activate it and squeeze it. Flip-flops or no? Men as well. What about you, Julian?
You know what? I tell my clients never to cancel. Do not cancel. I'm going to charge you regardlessly. Because I'm always talking about do not cancel. You know, so come here. I'm ready to teach you. I want you here. I want you to learn. So.
But there's something you say during class, because when you said it to me, I thought, oh yes, he does. And by the way, all week long, I did that to my clients and I blamed you. So go, what's the other thing?
No matter how many they do, I always tell them to do 2 more. Just 2 more. 2 more. You know?
But he does. He says, okay, 2 more. What do you think the biggest misconception about you is to the world? You said at lunch about you were talking about being approachable.
Oh yeah, some people think I'm not approachable. They think because I've been around for so long and that I'm above everything, which is totally wrong. I mean, I don't. I mean, people say, oh well, you should be this, this, and this because of your experience. Not at all. Last summer I was teaching on Skiros in Greece. It's an island, and it's this alternative summer thing where they do yoga, they do Pilates, they do, you know, getting to know yourself, etc., etc. And everybody mucks in. And one of my jobs was clearing tables after lunch, and I was wiping down his table, and this person came up and said, "What are you doing that for?" And I said, "To clean the table." He said, "But knowing who you are, why are you cleaning tables?" I said, "Because that's what we're supposed to be doing here, working together. And you know, if you can't, I fill the towels in the studio, mainly because I do it better than everyone else." But you know, the thing is, there's so many people to use an English phrase that's so far up their own behinds, it's unbelievable. And I can't bear this. I think whoever is if we're in the same community, we have different levels of experience, but we're all the same. Whether we've had 42 years like me or 15, we're all teachers. And I don't think no one should set themselves up to be better than others. I feel very privileged that I'm invited to places like Lost on Tour and Balanced Body, that I can share my experiences. And that's my privilege, to be able to share what I've learned over quite a long period of time.
Yeah, because there's no quick way to get that experience.
No.
You know, and I think sometimes people want that. You know, they want to learn now. Let me read about it. Let me, you write it down.
Well, what I find strange is someone will say, "Oh, I'm a master teacher," and I'll say, "Oh, that's interesting. How long have you been teaching?" "Oh, 5 years." I say, "Oh, very splendid. Congratulations."
Let me move on to another table.
You three have been a tremendous gift in my life. And I think that everybody in this room and thousands and more than thousands, I'm sure, of clients, individual clients, and Pilates teachers would feel the same way. So I'm going to put the three of you on the spot, and I'm going to ask each of you to tell me about the other two. What is so special about these two gentlemen?
Oh, I hate them both. Don't so seriously. I just, first of all, one of the main attributes, I think, of a teacher is humor. That you have to have fun. Because if you have fun, you're learning. And with these two, I always have fun. And I respect them as teachers. And I know, not so much with Troy, because I haven't known it so long, but with Julian, I know when we may not see each other for 2 or 3 years, that when we see each other or talk to each other on the phone, it's as if we had not, it's as if we'd spent the last weekend together, which I think is very special for me. And it's getting that way with Troy. It may change because he and his partner are coming to stay with me in London. Speak to me in January.
It's actually November. It's okay. It's sooner than you think.
No, I'm talking about after you've been.
Troy, what would you say?
I'm honored that they're my friends. I'm honored that I can call you both. I've called Julian before with problems, and he goes, I'm there for you, mate. And that, I've always felt like incredible. Alan, I got to go to his studio, and I had tingles down my spine the whole time, watching him work with people and really following and getting to know your late partner was a big thrill, because he did emails better than you. So it's this, I always feel like I'm just so humbled to be in the presence of two very, very fine teachers.
I think that's the thing that is nice when you've known people for a long time and they do the same thing as you do. There's no competition, and that's the thing I like. There's not a lot of men that teach Pilates out there. I mean, I wish there were more, obviously, but it's nice that, same thing as Troy said, I can call a few people up, if I've got an issue or a problem, and, I wouldn't feel any problem whatsoever just picking up the phone and talking to these two guys. And that's very, very important. I know a shitload of people, and got as everybody does, but who can you really call? When you've got an issue, because somewhere along the line they've gone through the same thing, because they do the same thing as you. And we get strung out and all caught up in ourselves, and that's the thing that's nice. It's friendship as well as friendship. Very important.
So we have time probably for one more question. I think that this is relevant to any of us, however long we've been teaching, or whatever short of a period of time, and we'll learn a little bit from you. What would you say to your younger teacher self if you could go back and give them one piece of advice?
To
You, as a young teacher.
so long ago. I can't. I would just. Well, this is a difficult one. Actually, I would just say, keep moving on. Don't stop. You know, some people will say, "Oh, I've learned this. This is." Always ask, always inquire, always move on. Look at things and don't necessarily change them for the sake of changing. But if they need changing, change. Even though it might be very hard for you, you question yourself all the time. If I'm doing something and I change it, I keep asking myself, why am I changing this? There is a reason for this, and it has to be for the benefit of your client. Rather than just going, oh, well, you know, this is the 100, this is this. Always look and say, is this right for this person? And I think this is what keeps one interested, is that always question. And one of my favorite phrases is, to my training course, is think outside the box, because inside the box is boring. And it can make you a boring teacher. If you move out of that box, you see things in a different way.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just keep on moving ahead. Just keep on teaching with passion, with clarity, with simplicity. Those clients will come to you. They really will.
And patience. You know, and what Alan said, where you have to let people go. You know, when you first start your own studio, if you choose, to start your own studio after you've gone through a certification program, or you think you want to start your own studio, you want those clients. You need those clients because you need, to keep your studio going, and you get them and you hold them, but you've got to just let them go, because 9 out of 10 times they'll come back anyway. You know, I encourage my clients to go to other studios. Go to other studios, because if you don't want to be here with us, then what's the point of doing it? If it's just because we're local, and around the corner, then, we're like Starbucks. There's hundreds of Pilates studios out there, but it's really the person that's behind the Pilates studio. Where's their ethics? And what I said before, if they just feel it's money, so patience, just let them go. Let them go. They will come back, and they'll bring people back with them too, I think.
Mm. And sometimes you invite people to go to other studios.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and they still come back.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think that you would want to share with us? No.
What I would like to say is, and this is judging by my day here, my 6 hours today, is what really impressed me was the enthusiasm of the students who I worked with today, and just keep it going, because I found the enthusiasm of my class this day was so invigorating, and I just hope they take that out to their clients and to their trainees. It's fantastic. This is what we need in this community, and I think it's it's Pilates on Tour that is helping to promote this, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, you wouldn't be here if you didn't.
So we'd like to thank all of you for, I'd like to thank all of you for being here so that I could do this with them. And I want to thank the three of you so much for allowing us to sit down and be a part of your world and learn a little bit more about you and hear some of your wisdom. So.
Thank you.